Good morning. This is Jason Dean coming at you again for another Film Fanatic show. So I hope everyone's doing good. It is Monday at about 19 after 9 o'clock. Pretty gray, overcasty day. I think it's supposed to be pretty nice for most of this week. But here we are into fall, very much into the fall season, and it is approaching Halloween time. So yeah, and the funny thing is, it's Halloween is my favorite holiday, which is probably not a huge surprise. But I and a lot of people are doing their 31 days of horror lists where they're setting themselves out to watch a horror movie every day, and then it makes this list and this whole kind of thing. And I it's funny because I watch horror movies all the time anyway. So it's kind of like Halloween, or that the state of mind of Halloween is kind of how I am year round. So I don't necessarily need a holiday to mark that special occasion. It's kind of just funny, and I don't usually have to decorate my house any differently. My house is kind of decorated year round, like it's a Halloween party. So that's just kind of how I roll. So it's not unusual or out of the ordinary for me to watch a whole slew of horror movies back to back. And I'm always, like I said, I like to always try to mix things up and try to, bring variety to this channel, even though for the most part, everything is kind of centered on a lot of kind of underground horror exploitation movies and all those kinds of things. Just recently I've been posting, and I finished up a big movie haul of a whole bunch of movies I just finished watching. And most of those films were movies I had never seen before, and they're mostly Italian movies from the 60s. Super cool, and I just got through all those, and I've been posting a bunch of things about those videos. Usually I'll post the little video reviews like this one. I'll usually post those to my personal page on Facebook, and then also Film Fanatic, my Facebook page. And then I usually, especially if I'm like really enthusiastic about the movie, what I'll usually do is I'll write a post with some photos, and I'll usually put those on my Instagram page, main at Film Fanatic, which is a page I started last year, which is newer. The Film Fanatic Facebook page I've had for actually quite a few years, about 6 or 7 years, maybe, well, probably a little less than that. And then there's a few other pages on Facebook that I'm a member of that are for public groups, private groups, but they're all catered towards people who really are deep lovers of the world of exploitation. So I usually post those to all those little areas. So and and it's been cool because recently I've been pretty busy with it, and a lot of people have been chiming in, and it's been really cool. I've gotten a bunch of new subscribers, but then I also have had quite a few people like commenting on a lot of these videos, and it's always kind of blows me away that there's a lot of people like me to a degree out there that have an interest in these really kind of weird, obscure movies, and that there's an actual audience for a lot of this stuff. It's pretty cool, and so you know that's always going to be the focus. And again, I like to try to mix things up. I like to bring different genres into the mix, and I like to focus also on newer films. Also relatively newer films or movies that I just saw in the theater, to try to mix things up, bringing variety to the channel and to the pages. So, like for example, I did a show where I did a video on The Conjuring, which I think it was funny. Last week I started thinking about that movie randomly, and I had seen it a bunch of times. I've always liked it, and it's definitely a contemporary horror movie, a possession movie, and I had this burning desire to watch it again. So I sat down and watched it. I had never reviewed it for this channel or talked about it, so I watched it and I was like, this movie is just so awesome. So I did a show on that. So I'm always trying to mix things up. I know this. So today's show is pretty similar in kind of the purpose behind it, and that is this movie that came out in 2011, which is crazy. And I consider it to be, even though that's quite a few years ago, I consider it to be, a really fun and kind of an exciting modern horror film. At least related to, in terms of relating it to the majority of the films that I do show on this channel, and especially recently, which a lot of the movies have been in the 60s. And I just recently did a movie that was from the 50s, Hot Rod Girl. And that is 2011's You're Next. This is a super fun movie. I've always dug this movie. Some people don't really like this. I've heard a lot of people kind of criticize this movie, saying, "Well, the writing's not really good. It's a little bit too generic and blah blah blah." But it's it's definitely campy. It's definitely a little bit silly. The writing at times is a little bit schlocky, but the kills are really great. I love the storyline. I think the storyline is really original. The atmosphere is great, and the killer or killers they all have an affinity for masks, which I have a deep love. So it has a really cool slasher element. It's an ultra low budget movie, which I really like. This movie was kind of, I think when it came out, it was fairly popular, but during during this time, in the mid 2000s, there was a rash of a lot of horror films that were coming out. The Conjuring and those movies were huge. And I think this movie came out around that time, and it was a little bit, kind of overlooked a little bit. I think it did have an audience, but it wasn't, a big blockbuster like The Conjuring. The Conjuring was a huge kind of phenomenon, and that launched, of course, a massive franchise and then all of these spin-off movies, which I'm not really a fan of, but I think The Conjuring is such an incredibly well done movie. And but I really like this movie a lot. I think it's a super fun movie. I've seen Your Next quite a few times. I remember seeing it maybe a year or two after it had come out on DVD, and I think I rented it a couple times, and then I bought it. Maybe I think I bought it on DVD. My I've talked about it a lot, but my mom is a big fan of horror films, and she actually she owns this movie on DVD, and I remember a few times borrowing it from her collection and watching it. And then about 2 or 3 years ago, I came across it. I think it was at wasn't Bull Moose. It was at Goodwill, I believe. And I came across a DVD version, a Blu-ray version of it, so I snagged it right up. And this version of this film, this transfer, is super awesome. It's The quality of this movie is so very cool. Like the transfer of the video, of the visual element, the sound, the mixing of this on Blu-ray is pretty incredible. I have a pretty cool sound system, aka man cave at home. I recently got a newer system, and where it's kind of like it acts like a Bose system, where my system here at home has been for a long time, and I still have it. I mainly use it now for stereo because the DVD player that I use with it is not very reliable a lot of the time. So about a couple of years ago, I've had the same Blu-ray player for about 7 or 8 years, and also with the sound system. And it's a really good sound system. It's got a subwoofer, four speakers, and it's totally immersive. and it's a really good system, and I have it set up pretty well. But about a few years ago, and then more so now, I couldn't play any DVD. I couldn't play any regular DVDs on it. It wouldn't, for some reason, it stopped. Most of the time when I put in DVDs, it would just wouldn't register anymore on the player, and so that was frustrating because I have a lot of DVDs and I still do buy DVDs, but I found myself not being able to watch a lot of DVDs when I wanted to, and and then even with Blu-rays, it never had doesn't have any problems playing Blu-rays, but you when you put in a Blu-ray disc, you would have to like kind of dick around with it for a minute or two, and sometimes eject it, press pause, shut it off, and it wouldn't. A lot of the times, it wouldn't accept. It wouldn't read when you put the Blu-ray in at first. Sometimes it would play right away, but a lot of times it was very fishnickety and touch and go. So it was kind of a pain in the ass, and I was like, okay, I need to get an upgrade because I try to as a collector and as a person who buys a lots of movies, I try to always buy mostly Blu-rays, but I still buy DVDs. Case in point, when I went to this big sale at Opera House Video a few weeks ago, most of the movies they had for sale and they were dirt cheap were Blu-ray or were DVDs. I did get some Blu-rays, but and then in my travels and stuff, I come across DVDs like at Goodwill, for instance. I don't If I'm at Bull Moose, I only usually buy Blu-rays. But I have quite a few. I have a ton of DVDs, and I every now and then come across some really fantastic DVDs. One of the ones that I found that I eventually want to get on Blu-ray, but one that I found at the sale at Opera House was a movie by Clint Eastwood, Absolute Power, which is one of my all-time favorite Clint Eastwood movies. And so situations like that, I'll snag up a DVD copy. But with the system I've had, it got really frustrating. So I had to get a new player. So I got a new player, but it's a newer version, and it's not compatible with the system that I have. So I've had to change the system that I have as far as what I listen to or what I watch movies on. So I have a different setup. And I wasn't super excited by it at first, but I'm really loving it now, and the sound is really, really great. And this was one of the first movies I watched on it, for one of the first Blu-rays, and I was very impressed. And this is a super entertaining movie. It's got some great kills. It's basically about this family that is kind of trapped in this big mansion, and the whole set of circumstances is basically like they're being attacked by these masked psychopaths, and you're not really sure why it's happening or why this family's being targeted. And as the movie kind of unravels, you start seeing that internally there's this conspiracy for within the family, or the family members, the sons and the daughters in the family, to basically more or less take over the estate. And so all of these things kind of unravel, and you start to realize, oh wait, there's like this really incredibly dark kind of conspiracy, with why all of this is happening and why everybody's getting picked off one by one. Very cool. The kills are really great. It's got a really great ending. It's pretty satisfying. The music's really great. The score is really great. Visually, it's really it's beautifully shot. I'm a big fan of the cinematography of this film. The opening sequence of this movie is so awesome. There's a certain particular song, and I kind of want to just save it for people out there to just see this movie for themselves. That's just really, really great. And the way they tie in the song and the music, there's like this theme, and it's really, really cool. Very, very cool. Big fan. And again, this movie is like I like that the way they utilize the budget of this film, because it's definitely like a small little indie flick, but it has this really cool use of practical effects, which I'm a big fan of. There's no CGI in the film, so the kills are really great. And it looks really good. Like I feel like they even know. Like I definitely consider this to be kind of an indie horror film, but they really put a lot of care into how they shot this film and how they put it together because it really feels like a much bigger film than it actually is, as far as like the cinematography, the production, the atmosphere, the locations. Very cool. Some pretty creative kills in this movie too. I love that. I love the plot reveal. I love the ending of this film. It's pretty twisted. It's pretty demented, and it's a really fun movie. I just feel like it's a fun ride. It's a it's kind of a bubblegum popcorn horror film in a lot of ways that has a real indie vibe to it, but it has a high production value for what it is. And it's great. It's a really fun movie, and I think this movie is a little bit underrated and a movie that is definitely overlooked by fans of horror, especially like contemporary horror films or more or films that are more in that contemporary style. But very cool, and I highly recommend it. It's the other thing that's really cool about this film is Ty West is actually in this movie, and Ty West is just such a great director, and he is really one of the best horror directors right now working in the film industry. He was an actor as well. He's acted in quite a few movies over the years, and he's most well known as a director. Ty West has really put himself on the mark. Uh, really put himself in the light of being, arguably the most talented horror director right now, with his new trilogy that's been out for a couple of years, with X just being an amazing classic slasher film, or also Pearl, which is such an awesome movie, and then the third movie that's coming out, I think relatively soon, Maxine. Just such great films, and he's also done The House of the Devil and a handful of other really great independent horror films. But he's an actor in this movie. He plays one of the kind of the family members that's caught up in this whole kind of conspiracy, and it's great. He actually plays kind of himself. He plays a filmmaker. He plays a filmmaker who makes documentaries. But very very cool. So I definitely recommend Your Next. It's a one fun ride, and a good example of a really good, solid, super entertaining kind of indie horror flick. From more of the modern times, if you will. So thanks again. This is Jason Dean, and we will see you next time. Peace.